battlefield stretched endlessly, a wasteland of twisted metal and broken ships. Alien bodies lay scattered across the charred ground, their eyes unblinking, their lives extinguished by the overwhelming might of the invaders. The once proud alliance, made up of civilizations that had prospered for millennia, now fought desperately, their resources nearly depleted, their hope dwindling. Their weapons, once considered cutting-edge, now seemed futile against the advanced, relentless forces that had swept across the stars. For years, the galactic war had raged, a conflict that had left countless worlds shattered, its inhabitants forced to watch as everything they had built crumbled. The enemy was unlike anything they had ever faced, an unstoppable, seemingly invincible force that had decimated entire fleets in moments. The invaders' ships, sleek and otherworldly, glowed with an eerie, cold light, their weapons capable of disintegrating entire planets with a single blast. Nothing had been able to halt their advance, and now the last remaining hope of survival was fading fast. On the edge of a once great colony, a group of commanders sat huddled around a table, their faces grim and weary from the never-ending battle. The air was thick with tension, the weight of the situation hanging heavily in the room. The holo screens before them flickered with the data of their last desperate attempts to turn the tide of war. But it was clear victory was slipping further and further out of reach. One of the commanders, an alien with dark, reptilian scales, slammed a fist onto the table, his sharp eyes blazing with frustration. "We've lost every single fleet we sent out. Our armies are decimated. There's nothing left. We're finished." Another commander, a tall, elegant figure of a species known for their advanced intellect, spoke softly, though her voice carried a cold authority. "We've considered every option. There is no more room for strategy, no more resources. The enemy has outclassed us in every way." The room fell silent as the gravity of their situation settled over them. The war had seemed unwinnable for so long, and now it was almost certain that defeat was inevitable. But the commander with the reptilian scales, desperate, took a step forward, his voice a low growl. "There's only one thing left we haven't tried. It's insane, but it might be our last chance." The others exchanged uncertain glances. They had already exhausted every avenue, every possible solution. What could this new plan possibly entail? The reptilian commander activated a new holoscreen, revealing a dark and cryptic image. The screen displayed a planet small, unassuming, barely noticeable among the vast expanse of space. But as the image zoomed in, a strange symbol appeared on the planet's surface, one that none of them had ever seen before. It was a symbol that resonated with something ancient, something primal. A voice crackled over the comms, speaking the words that would change everything: humans. The room fell still, as if the mention of the word alone carried weight far beyond its simple syllables. The commanders were taken aback. Humans? The species that had once been a curiosity at best, and now barely a footnote in the galactic records. The human race had always been overlooked, dismissed by the more advanced civilizations as primitive, incapable of meaningful contribution to the larger galactic community. But this was different. The reptilian commander spoke again, his tone now one of cold resolve. "We've been monitoring them for years. Their species has always been underestimated, but we can no longer deny it. They've fought and survived against forces far greater than their own for centuries. If there's anyone capable of turning the tide in this war, it's them. The elegant alien commander's expression hardened. "You're suggesting we bring them into the fold? The humans? The same species we've ignored for so long?" "Yes," the reptilian commander replied. "They may be small, but they've demonstrated resilience and an ability to adapt unlike any other species we've encountered. They may be the one thing we have left." A murmur ran through the room as the others processed this. The humans had always been regarded with contempt, their technology considered obsolete compared to the other races. How could they possibly change the course of this war? How could they, a race of mere mortals by galactic standards, be the key to victory? Yet, deep down, there was something about the human spirit, something undeniable. The legends of their past victories against overwhelming odds, with nothing but their courage and determination, were well known throughout the galaxy. The tales of humanity's battles, from their brutal wars on their own homeworld to their daring space missions that had defied even the most advanced civilizations, were stories that inspired awe and fear in equal measure. The commanders exchanged looks, uncertainty giving way to a growing sense of urgency. They had no other choice. The war was slipping away from them. Their resources were drained, their fleets in tatters, their once great alliance on the brink of collapse. If they didn't act quickly, the enemy would wipe them all out. There was no time to waste. The elegant commander spoke, her voice now steady, though there was a hint of disbelief. "Then we send for them. If humanity is truly as capable as you claim, then we must give them the chance to prove it. But if they fail, if they cannot deliver, this war ends with our extinction." The reptilian commander nodded grimly. "We've already lost everything. If we don't try, we lose everything anyway." The decision was made. A signal was sent, a desperate call for help reaching the far corners of the galaxy. It wasn't just a request for aid, it was a plea. A plea to the humans, a race that had once been overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated. Now, their only hope rested in the hands of those who had been ignored for so long. As the message was sent, the commanders could only wait. Would the humans answer the call? Would they be the ones to turn the tide of the war? Or was this the last, desperate act of a galaxy on the brink of annihilation? In the vast expanse of space, one lone human ship floated in the darkness, its crew unaware of the monumental decision that had just been made. But soon they would know. And soon they would face a challenge unlike anything they had ever imagined, a challenge that would test their will, their courage, and their ability to fight against all odds. They would either be the saviors the galaxy so desperately needed, or be crushed under the weight of forces beyond their control. But one thing was certain, the war was about to get very interesting. And the humans, the race that had been written off by the rest of the galaxy, were about to show everyone exactly what they were made of. The call had been sent, the signal piercing the vast emptiness of space toward the homeworld of humanity. On Earth, life went on as it always had, unaware of the galaxy's struggles, the desperate plea being made from across the stars. But for those who knew the truth, the fate of the galaxy now lay in the hands of a species long underestimated. In the heart of the human fleet, on a ship named Valor, the response began to take shape. The vessel, though relatively small compared to the massive warships of the alien alliance, had a storied history. The Valor had seen countless battles, carrying humanity's flag into the darkest corners of space. Its crew, made up of the best humanity had to offer, was accustomed to adversity, accustomed to fighting against impossible odds. Yet none of them had ever faced anything like this. Commander Jonah Gray stood at the helm of the ship, staring out into the void. He was a man whose reputation had been built on resilience and strategy. The call to arms, transmitted from an unknown alien species, had come as a shock. But for Gray, it wasn't so much the fact that the galaxy needed help, it was the fact that humanity had been chosen to answer the call, to be the last hope in a war that had already claimed the lives of so many. He wasn't sure what to make of it. Humanity's history had been one of fierce independence, of fighting for survival when the odds were stacked against them. They had never been part of the galactic alliances, never held the power or influence of the older species. To be called upon now, when all seemed lost, was both an honor and a burden. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being thrust into a battle they had no business fighting, yet here they were, ready or not. The ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Harper, approached with a holo display, interrupting his thoughts. The image on the screen showed an alien fleet in the distance, their ships a strange combination of organic shapes and mechanical sophistication. It was a far cry from the traditional designs the humans were used to. "They've confirmed our location," Harper said, her voice laced with a mix of apprehension and awe. "The Alliance knows we're here. They've requested we join them on the front lines within 24 hours. Commander Gray took a deep breath. Time was running out. They couldn't afford to waste any. The mission wasn't just about proving humanity's worth. It was about survival. They were the last hope. And now, the weight of that responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. "Prepare the crew," Gray ordered. "We're not waiting for orders. We're going in." As the crew scrambled to ready the ship for deployment, Gray made his way to the ship's war room. The team gathered there, all of them experienced officers, but each of them felt the tension in the air. The fleet they were joining was massive, far beyond anything humanity had ever seen, and they were just one ship, small and untested by comparison. Lieutenant Brooks, the ship's strategist, stood next to the tactical screen, his eyes darting between the various displays. "The alien forces are closing in on the final defensive position of the Alliance," he said, tapping a few commands. "We've received a transmission from the other species. They're losing ground, but there's one thing we still don't understand. They haven't shared what the enemy's capabilities are. We don't even know what we're up against." Gray looked at the screen. The enemy's ships were unlike anything he had ever seen. There was no pattern to their movements, no apparent strategy. They seemed to operate with a precision that suggested they were more than just a military force, they were a force of nature. And that was what worried him the most. "Do we have any idea who they are?" Gray asked, his voice steady, though doubt gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. "No," Brooks replied. "Only that they came from beyond the farthest reaches of known space. Whoever they are, they're far more advanced than any of us. The Alliance is crumbling, and we're supposed to save them." Gray felt a sinking feeling in his chest, but he didn't let it show. They didn't have the luxury of questioning the mission. The survival of countless worlds depended on them, and if they couldn't hold the line, then everything humanity had worked for their future, their very existence would be wiped away in the blink of an eye. His thoughts were interrupted as Harper's voice came over the comms. "Commander, we've received a communication from the alien fleet. They're requesting our presence immediately." Gray nodded, his face set in determination. "All right, set course. We meet them head on. It's time to find out exactly what we're up against." As the Valor rumbled to life, its engines flaring with power, the crew worked with practiced precision, each person aware of the gravity of their mission. But as they neared the alien fleet, something unexpected happened. A transmission came through, its source untraceable, but the message clear: you will never defeat us. You are nothing but ants beneath our boot. No one has ever withstood our assault. The words echoed in Gray's mind, and for the briefest moment, doubt crept into his thoughts. Were they making a terrible mistake? Was humanity truly ready for this? But there was no turning back now. This was their moment. The Valor accelerated, cutting through the void toward the alien fleet with a newfound resolve. As they approached the battle lines, the sheer scale of the conflict became clear. Alien ships clashed with the invaders, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. The sounds of battle, distant but unmistakable, echoed in the ship's hull, and the crew braced for impact. Gray stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the oncoming enemy, knowing that they were about to face a challenge unlike any they had ever seen. But the humans were a resourceful species, and if there was one thing they had learned through centuries of survival, it was how to fight back when the odds were stacked against them. The Valor dove into the chaos, and as it did, Gray's voice rang out over the comms. We fight for survival. We fight for every world that depends on us. We fight because we're human. The battle had only just begun, and yet the outcome was uncertain. Would humanity's greatest strength, their sheer will to survive, be enough to turn the tide? Or was this the beginning of the end? The answers lay ahead, somewhere in the heart of the conflict, and only time would tell if the humans could save the galaxy from the brink of destruction. The battle raged on in the vast expanse of space, a chaotic swirl of flashing lights, twisted metal, and the deep, resounding thrum of massive ships exchanging fire. The Valor weaved through the engagement, its crew moving with deadly precision, but the enemy fleet seemed endless, an overwhelming force that outnumbered them at every turn. Commander Gray stood firm at the helm, his face lit by the tactical displays and the glow of enemy ships in the distance. The intensity of the moment burned through him like a fire, but his resolve never wavered. There were no second chances. There was no retreat. The galaxy was counting on them, and humanity wasn't known for giving up without a fight. Target lock! Lieutenant Harper called out from her station, voice tight with urgency. The enemy fleet was closing in fast, their weapons charging with deadly intent. They needed to act now, or be crushed under the weight of the assault. Ready to fire on your command, Lieutenant Brooks added, eyes fixed on the screen, tracking enemy movements. Do it, Gray shouted, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The crew responded instantly. The Valor's main cannons fired, the energy blasts lighting up the darkness like flares, cutting through the surrounding ships with surgical precision. For a brief moment, it felt as though they might stand a chance. The aliens were taken aback by the humans' tenacity, their ships torn apart in bursts of fire and sparks. But as soon as they seemed to gain ground, the alien ships retaliated, firing an array of weapons so powerful they felt like punches from a god. The Valor rocked violently, alarms blaring as the hull groaned under the pressure. Shields are down to 30%, Harper reported, her hands flying over the controls, doing everything she could to keep the ship intact. Get those shields back up, Gray barked, but even as he spoke, his thoughts were consumed by the grim reality. The Valor couldn't take another direct hit like that, and they were dangerously close to enemy lines. The alien fleet's tactics were unlike anything the humans had seen before. Their ships moved with a fluidity that suggested a level of coordination and intelligence beyond any technology humanity had ever encountered. They adapted too quickly. No matter how many ships the humans destroyed, the aliens seemed to have more, always coming at them with the same relentless precision. It was clear now that this wasn't just a war. It was an existential struggle. Gray's heart raced as he surveyed the battlefield. The feeling of being overwhelmed started to sink in, creeping up his spine like a shadow, but he shoved it aside. "We're not done yet," he muttered, though even to himself it sounded more like a plea than a command. Brooks was staring intently at the display, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Commander," he said, voice steady but tinged with unease, "I think I figured out their strategy. They're targeting our weak points. They know we're smaller, less advanced, and they're exploiting that." "Then we change the game," Gray replied, determination flashing in his eyes. He turned to his tactical officer. "Harper, get us into their blind spot. We'll need to move fast and hard. We can't let them box us in." Harper nodded, her hands moving rapidly across the controls. The Valor lurched forward, twisting and diving to avoid the oncoming fire. Gray could see it an opening, a weak point in the enemy's formation. It was a calculated risk, but it was their only shot. "We're in," Harper confirmed, as the ship rocketed through a narrow gap between two of the larger enemy ships. For a moment, it seemed like they had escaped unscathed, but then the warning sirens blared again. A massive enemy cruiser was coming straight for them, its weapons primed. "Brace for impact," Gray shouted, gripping the console as the ship jerked violently under the alien assault. The Valor's engines screamed in protest as they swerved to avoid the incoming fire, but they weren't fast enough. The ship took another hit, and the hull groaned again. Harper fought to keep the ship steady. "We're losing power to the aft sections," she yelled, her voice filled with panic. "We're not giving up," Gray said through gritted teeth. "Keep us moving." It felt as if they were running out of time, out of options. The enemy was closing in. Their advanced technology was simply too much to overcome in a straight fight. They needed something else. Something that only humanity could provide, an edge that the aliens couldn't anticipate. It was then that Gray realized what he had to do. "Brooks," he said, turning to his strategist, "can we break their formation?" Brooks looked up, eyes wide with a sudden realization. "I think we can," he said, a spark of hope kindling in his chest. "It's risky, but if we get close enough, we can disrupt their fleet coordination. Their ships rely on a network to synchronize their movements. If we can break that connection, we have a chance," Gray finished. "Harper, take us in." Full speed. The crew worked in a synchronized frenzy, each member pushing themselves beyond their limits. The Valor's engines roared as they closed the distance, weaving between fire and explosions. Every moment counted. As the ship neared the heart of the enemy formation, Gray's pulse raced. The alien ships didn't know what was coming. They were focused on the Valor, unaware that the humans had learned their pattern and were about to turn it against them. "Now," Gray barked. With a sharp turn, the Valor executed a high-risk maneuver that took them directly into the middle of the alien fleet. The ship's cannons fired in quick succession, not just at the nearest ships, but at key points within the alien formation. Gray could see the moment it worked. The alien ships started to hesitate, their movements slowing, breaking from the tight coordination they had relied on. "It's working," Brooks said, his voice filled with disbelief. The aliens were no longer a single, unstoppable force. They were scattered, disoriented, and vulnerable. It was a small opening, but it was enough. Humanity's ingenuity, their ability to think differently, had given them a chance. But as the Valor prepared to push deeper into enemy lines, an unexpected pulse of energy flared out from the heart of the alien fleet. It was like a shockwave that struck at the very core of the Valor, knocking out their systems in an instant. The crew was thrown forward, their hands gripping whatever they could as the lights flickered and alarms blared. "What was that?" Harper shouted, trying desperately to regain control. "Systems are down. Shields are offline." Gray's heart sank as he realized that the tables had just turned. They weren't out of danger yet, not by a long shot. The Valor drifted in the void, its once pristine systems now crippled by the sudden pulse of energy. Sparks flew from the panels, and alarms screamed through the command deck. But in the eerie silence that followed, Gray could barely hear his own thoughts. His hands gripped the arms of his seat as if they could somehow steady the shaking ship. The flickering lights seemed to echo his own sense of dread. Each moment that passed without action only served to deepen the peril they were now in. "Commander," Harper's voice was strained, but her resolve remained steady. "The enemy fleet is closing in again. We're sitting ducks with no shields and no way to fight back." Gray glanced around, taking in the sight of his crew. They were all exhausted, worn thin by the battle, but their eyes were clear. They knew what needed to be done, but the odds were stacked higher than ever before. The alien fleet had adapted, now utilizing a weapon they hadn't anticipated, a disruptor pulse that neutralized human technology faster than they could react. But even as Gray sat there, contemplating their next move, the worst was still to come. Through the viewports, he saw it. The flagship of the alien fleet, massive, towering, a ship of unimaginable power, was bearing down on them. It was unlike any vessel they had encountered before. Its sleek, dark form shimmered with a strange energy, as if it were pulling the very fabric of space toward it. The distance between them closed faster than Gray could calculate. The Valor, in its crippled state, was no match for it. "We can't outrun that thing," Gray muttered, though he wasn't entirely sure he was speaking to anyone in particular. "We're going to have to outsmart it." "Commander, the energy pulse came from that flagship," Brooks reported, voice urgent. "If we can target it, disrupt its pulse generator, we might be able to turn the tide." Gray turned to him, brow furrowed in thought. The idea made sense, but it was a long shot. They had no weapons left capable of striking at that distance with any accuracy. The Valor's cannons were dead, and their remaining torpedoes would be useless in the face of the alien fleet's defenses. Then, the impossible happened. From the shadow of the enemy flagship, a new ship appeared. Unlike the others, this one wasn't just another alien vessel. It was human, the unmistakable shape of a Caden-class warship, one of the most advanced ships humanity had ever built. But this ship had been thought lost. Its crew had been presumed dead, its mission abandoned after a disastrous engagement weeks earlier. How could it be here? Is that a human ship?" Harper gasped, her voice filled with disbelief. Gray leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "It can't be." But it was. And in that moment, the stakes shifted dramatically. The human ship cut through the alien forces with the same grace and aggression the Valor had, launching a series of strikes that seemed to momentarily stun the alien fleet. It was clear they had come to join the fight, but who could possibly be aboard this ship? Was this some kind of rescue, or was it a hidden weapon humanity had kept in reserve? Then, the transmission came through. "Commander Gray, this is Admiral Shaw. You've been doing well, but now it's time for us to finish this. We'll need your ship to pull back." The voice crackled across the comms, carrying the weight of authority. but Gray could feel a sense of tension laced in every word. Shaw was a legend, a tactical genius, but his sudden reappearance raised more questions than answers. "What's going on here?" Gray demanded. "You were presumed dead. Where the hell have you been?" The response came fast, but it was cryptic. "We've been keeping the war effort alive. I'm not going into details, but we have something the aliens don't. A secret weapon. Now, pull your shit back, Commander. We'll need you to hold the line while we make the final strike." The transmission cut off as abruptly as it had started, leaving Gray with more questions than ever before. Who were these new humans? And what kind of weapon did they have that could possibly turn the tide in this war? Just as Gray processed the cryptic message, the alien flagship launched another pulse of energy, a blast so powerful it seemed to tear at the very fabric of space itself. The Valor shuddered, systems flickering again. They were running out of time. "Harper, can we reestablish our shields?" Gray asked, his voice tight with urgency. "I'm trying, but the systems are so damaged it might take too long. If we don't act fast, we're done for." And that's when it hit him. The alien flagship wasn't just a ship, it was a weapon. It wasn't just absorbing energy, it was harnessing the very power of the stars themselves. The pulse wasn't just a weapon. It was a generator, one that could obliterate entire fleets in a single strike. That was how they had stayed ahead of the humans in this war. But if they could disable it, if they could somehow break the flow of energy, it could all come crashing down. The aliens would lose their edge, and the tide of the war could be turned in an instant. But to do that, they would need the Valor. They would need everything they had left to strike. "Brooks, you're with me," Gray said. "We're going to take the Valor right into the heart of their fleet. We have one shot." The tension was palpable. Even as the rest of the crew prepared for the desperate charge, the question lingered in the air. Could humanity really do it? Could they defeat a force so much larger, more advanced and relentless? Would the secret weapon from Admiral Shaw really be enough? Or was it just another trick to pull the humans into an even worse trap? As Gray watched the alien fleet closing in, it felt like the entire galaxy was holding its breath. This was it, the final move. And everything depended on the humans pulling through. Gray's heart raced as the Valor surged forward, all systems now pushed to their limits. The alien flagship loomed large in front of them, its pulsating energy field casting an ominous glow across the battlefield. The human warship was just behind them, launching a barrage of energy bolts that cracked through the alien defenses. They had only moments before the enemy's pulse generator would recharge, and with it, another devastating wave of destruction would obliterate the remnants of the human fleet. Gray clenched his jaw, his hand steady on the control console. "We go in hard, no hesitation," he said, voice firm. The ship's engines hummed to life, shuddering under the strain, but it held together. He could feel the weight of his crew's eyes on him, every decision carrying the fate of their lives and the outcome of the war. The distance closed quickly. The alien flagship, brimming with unimaginable power, towered over them. It would take everything they had, every ounce of human ingenuity, strength, and determination to make it out alive. As the Valor neared the flagship, Gray's mind raced. They had no more weapons, no shield, and their engines were barely functional. All they had left was a single, desperate gamble. They would board the enemy ship. "Harper, get those boarding pods ready," Gray ordered. There was no room for hesitation. "Aye, sir. But there's a catch. Their internal systems are protected by layers of encryption. We won't be able to hack them quickly, Harper warned, eyes focused on the readouts. We don't have time for anything else. Get us close. That's our only shot, Gray said, his voice cold with determination. The boarding pods deployed, piercing the atmosphere of the alien ship with incredible speed. As the Valor veered to avoid another incoming blast, the pods shot forward, latching onto the hull of the flagship. The crew barely had time to prepare for impact before the force of the collision sent them stumbling across the deck. Move out, Gray barked, rallying his team as they donned their gear. We breached the heart of the ship. We shut it down. The team stormed through the breached door, facing a series of complex corridors, each one guarded by alien warriors. Gray's pulse quickened, but he didn't hesitate. He had led men into battles before, but this was different. There were no guarantees this time. The stakes were higher than ever. They fought their way deeper into the ship, each step drawing them closer to the core. The corridors were a maze, alien technology intertwining with what appeared to be a living organic mass, suggesting that the aliens were not just advanced technologically, but biologically connected to their ships. It was a strange and unnerving combination of biology and engineering, something that Gray had never faced before. Finally, they reached the heart of the ship, a massive chamber that looked like the inside of a reactor. The pulse generator loomed at the center, its power fluctuating dangerously. Gray's heart raced as he assessed the situation. There were no soldiers here, just the machine. This was it. If they could shut it down, the alien fleet would lose its edge and the war could shift in humanity's favor. But just as he made his move toward the generator, the ship's alarms blared. A low, resonant hum filled the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of a voice, the alien commander's voice. You think you can destroy us? You think your feeble species stands a chance? The voice echoed through the chamber, cold and disdainful. You will die just as every other species has before you. Gray's skin prickled. He recognized the voice. It was the same one he had heard on the battlefield, taunting him and his crew. The alien commander wasn't just a leader. It was the heart of the fleet. And now, the war had taken an even darker turn. Gray, what's going on? Harper's voice crackled over the comms. We've got company inbound. They're bringing reinforcements. Gray's eyes widened as he saw the walls of the chamber split open. Dozens of alien warriors, more than they could handle, poured in, weapons raised. They had no choice but to fight their way out. Get to the generator. Now, Gray shouted, his pulse hammering in his chest. There was no retreat, no turning back. The battle exploded into chaos. Gray and his team fought with every ounce of their strength, pushing back the relentless alien warriors. But for every alien they brought down, another took its place. The Valor's boarding party had become trapped, fighting an endless tide of alien forces. They had only one chance left, and Gray knew it. With bloodied hands, Gray made his way to the generator, fighting off another alien soldier in a swift motion. He reached out, desperate, as he pulled a small device from his belt. The device was human ingenuity at its finest, a high-frequency disruptor that could disable alien technology. This was their last hope. Gray pressed the device to the core of the generator, activating it. The entire chamber trembled as the device began to work, sending pulses of energy that tore at the structure of the generator. But just as it seemed, the device would work. A flash of light erupted from the heart of the ship. The alien commander stood before him, towering in the center of the chamber, its form shifting and contorting, becoming something far more terrifying than before. It wasn't just a commander. It was a force of nature, an embodiment of its entire species' will to conquer. The alien had merged with the ship, taking control of the very core Gray had been trying to disable. "You cannot win," the alien hissed, its voice an unsettling mix of anger and cold amusement. "You are nothing." Gray's heart skipped a beat. His last gambit, the one thing that could shift the balance of the war, had failed. But then something unexpected happened. A shockwave rocked the chamber, and the sound of human gunfire rang out from the distance. The alien warriors faltered, their focus split. The other human ship, the one thought lost, had arrived. The Admiral's voice crackled through Gray's comms again. "You thought we were alone, Commander, but you should know better than that. Humanity doesn't abandon its own." The reinforcements broke through, overwhelming the alien forces in the chamber. With their help, Gray and his crew finally reached the heart of the generator. In one final push, they activated the disruptor, sending a pulse of energy through the alien flagship's core. It didn't explode. It shattered, its systems collapsing as the life force of the alien fleet began to unravel. The flagship's once impenetrable energy field faltered, and within moments, the entire alien fleet was incapacitated. The war was won. But as Gray looked back at the destruction, he couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't won just because of their strength. It was their ability to fight for survival against impossible odds that had tipped the balance. The aliens had underestimated humanity's resolve. And as he stood in the wreckage of the flagship, Gray realized something else. This was just the beginning. There would always be another battle, another fight to face, but humanity had proven one undeniable truth. They would never be conquered. I can't provide that many words at once, but I can certainly continue the story and wrap it up with a satisfying conclusion. Here's the next part. The aftermath of the battle was eerily silent. Gray stood among the wreckage of the alien flagship, his chest heaving with the adrenaline that still coursed through his veins. His crew gathered around him, their faces covered in grime and sweat, but their expressions were those of hard-earned triumph. They had done the impossible. Against all odds, they had shattered the alien fleet, dismantled the invaders' stronghold, and emerged victorious. But even as Gray stood there, the weight of the moment began to settle on him. They had won, yes, but the victory felt bittersweet, as though it came with an awareness that the war was not truly over. The alien forces may have been defeated, but their reach was vast. The universe was filled with other unknown threats, other potential enemies waiting in the dark. This battle had been humanity's to win, but it had also been a reminder the struggle for survival would never stop. As Gray surveyed the wreckage, he saw the bodies of the fallen, some human, some alien, scattered across the battlefield. The sight of it made him feel hollow, despite the victory. They had lost so many in the fight, and in their wake, a fragile peace had been forged, one that could easily unravel in the blink of an eye. What came next? What happened after this first taste of real victory? The Valor's crew had earned their rest, but there was no real time to savor the moment. The fleet needed to regroup, and the higher-ups were already sending their reports and assessments. As Gray made his way back to the ship's command center, his mind raced with all the things left unanswered. What happened to the rest of the alien forces? Were there more of them hiding, waiting for the right time to strike again? The war might have seemed like it was won, but Gray wasn't naive enough to believe it would be so simple. He walked through the corridors of the ship, nodding at the crew members who had worked tirelessly through the chaos. They were exhausted, their bodies bruised and broken, but their spirits were unshaken. This victory was theirs, and it was theirs alone. But as Gray glanced back at the ship's hull, his gaze softened. It had been his team that had done the impossible, pushed the boundaries of human determination, and refused to accept defeat. He couldn't help but feel pride swell within him, despite the uncertainty that lingered. When he arrived at the command center, the admiral was already waiting for him, flanked by other officers, all of them eager to discuss the aftermath. Gray stood before them, his expression somber as he listened to the debriefing. "We've identified the alien species," the admiral began, "and we've found evidence that they're not the only ones. We've intercepted transmissions pointing to other fleets, other forces. This wasn't just an isolated incident, Commander. It was part of something larger." Gray's heart sank. As much as they had fought, as much as they had lost, it seemed the war was far from over. The alien forces, though scattered, were only the first wave of an invading army that stretched across the stars. "What does that mean for us?" Gray asked, his voice steady but laced with concern. He had lived through the worst humanity had to offer, but the knowledge that there were more enemies out there, more dangers lurking, made him wonder just how much more they could endure. "It means," the admiral said, "that we can't stop here. We've secured this system, yes, but we need to take the fight to them. We need to show them that humanity is not just a fleeting power, it's a force to be reckoned with." The room grew quiet. Gray understood what the admiral was saying. The battle had been won, but it was only a small skirmish in a much larger conflict. Humanity had proven its resilience, but now they had to prove their resolve. There could be no more hesitation, no more second-guessing. The future depended on their strength. Gray glanced out the window of the command center, looking at the stars. He knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more battles, more losses. But the one thing he knew for sure was that humanity would never back down. The fight for survival would continue, not just for the crew of the Valor, but for every person, every human out there. A voice broke his reverie. "Commander Gray, we've finished analyzing the wreckage from the alien flagship," one of the officers said. "You might want to see this." Gray walked over to the officer's terminal, where a series of images appeared on the screen. The wreckage was more than just a fallen ship. It was a treasure trove of data, technology, and alien artifacts. Among the debris, something caught his eye, a strange device, one that didn't seem to match anything they had encountered before. "What is this?" Gray asked. "We're still running tests, but it appears to be some kind of energy source," the officer replied. "It could be a key to unlocking more of their technology. If we can understand how it works, it might give us an edge in future battles." Gray studied the image for a moment, his mind already racing. This could be the breakthrough they needed. It could change the course of the war. But there was something else, a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. This device, whatever it was, felt too perfect. It didn't belong here, not just in the alien flagship, but in this fight. Was it a gift from their enemies, or was it something else entirely? What if we're being led into something? Gray murmured under his breath. What if they want us to find this? The officer looked at him curiously, but Gray could already feel the weight of his own thoughts pulling him down. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about understanding the forces at play, and how much of this war had been set in motion long before humanity ever had a chance. As the crew moved forward with the analysis, Gray couldn't shake the feeling that the war was just beginning. They had fought back the aliens, but the true nature of the conflict who was behind it all was still hidden beneath layers of deceit and manipulation. And so, as the stars stretched out before them, Gray's resolve hardened. The future would be written, not by those who surrendered to fear, but by those who fought for a future they could protect. Humanity had come a long way, but it wasn't over yet. The real fight had only just begun.